Hello and welcome to the Coaching Chapters podcast, the space where ideas turn into actions and dreams become reality. I'm your host, Beenish Mirza, and in each episode I will sit down with some really wonderful, incredible women who've taken a spark of inspiration and transformed into something so meaningful. These are real stories of purpose, passion, and perseverance. So wherever you're listening from, settle in and get ready to be inspired. I'm so excited to introduce this week's guest, Shamaila Khan. Shamaila is a family lawyer by profession, a wife, a mother to 2 children, and now the author of a beautiful children's book titled All the Ways to Be Pretty, published by Cube Publishing. This book isn't your usual picture book. It's a starting point for parents who want to talk to their children, especially their daughters, about beauty through an Islamic lens. She noticed that girls in particular are told to show up in a way where they have to wear pretty dresses, present their hair in a certain way, while boys do not have that expectation from their families or society. From her own lived experiences, she really wanted to reshape the language around helping young children, particularly girls, see beauty as something much deeper, more expansive and more empowering, and linking it to the teachings of Islam. Her book provides new vocabulary and language rooted in faith, self-worth, self-esteem, and authenticity. So let's dive into this conversation with Shamaila and explore how we can begin to reimagine beauty for our children. Hi Shamaila, so lovely to have you here on the Coaching Chapters podcast. I'm so excited to talk about this wonderful topic and your amazing book. But before we sort of dive into that, could you just tell the audience a little about yourself, your background, and what you're hoping to discuss in our conversation today?
Absolutely. Thank you, Beenish, so much for having me. I'm so excited for this discussion. I'm Shamaila. I'm Australian, born and raised in Sydney, and now living in Melbourne. I am a wife. I'm a mother. I have a girl aged 9 and a little boy who is just about to turn 3. I'm a lawyer, and I'm also a writer now, apparently, which still feels quite surreal. And I'm really looking forward to this discussion. We're going to touch on some themes and concepts that I'm really passionate about.
Fantastic. So, if we go straight into it then, so I know you've written a beautiful book, All the Ways to Be Pretty. And so could you tell us a bit more about your personal experience? What led you to the world of children's literature?
Oh, goodness. I never intended to become like a children's book author. I've always written, like from a very early age, I've been a voracious reader, and I've always written like little stories here and there. And I always thought I would write a book for adults or young adults, maybe. Like children's literature never even entered my mind. But I'm not a particularly disciplined writer. So I feel like in order to write something as lengthy as an adult or a young adult book, you need a lot of time and discipline and focus to research and do it well. Setting aside, several hours in a day potentially. And I've just never been disciplined enough to do that. So I never really, made any headway. I always write really organically. So I write little bits here and there, and just share them with my family or on Instagram, just sort of thoughts and reflections. So that I've been doing consistently. And the idea for this book, almost like the wording of this book from beginning to end, just sort of came to me one afternoon. And I don't really know exactly what sparked it, but it just came to me and it was like begging to be written down. So I immediately wrote it down. And it was the first time that I'd ever written something where I looked at it and I thought, this is actually quite good. I feel like I'm like my own harshest critic. That this was one of those things where I myself was like, hey, this isn't bad, And this, I think maybe at the time my daughter was small, so I was reading a lot of children's books to her, and I was reading in a really like melodic way and sing-songy and quite poetic. And that's kind of what inspired the writing in this book as well. It's written in a rhythmic, lyrical format. It's designed to be read out loud in a melodic way. So that's really how it happened. It just sort of came out of me that way. And I made a few tweaks to it, and then I sent it out to a couple of publishers, and next minute we're getting published.
I love that because it sounds like actually you were just so in your flow and it came to you and it's something you're really proud of. And particularly, I guess, the faith element of it. So obviously it's got an Islamic lens to it. It's being published through Q Publishing. So can you tell us some more around, how important was it for you to have that faith-based lens through the storytelling you've done?
Yeah. Look, my faith is central to my life and it heavily influences everything I do, and it heavily influenced the book. This is a book for Muslim girls. Like, I'm quite unapologetic about that. It's not a book that's designed for everyone. People who are not Muslim are more than welcome to buy it and, read it. But the book contains like Islamic content. It references the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, his wives, female Sahaba, and refers to them directly as role models. And it sort of presupposes that the reader has that Islamic background and that Islamic knowledge. And I did that really deliberately. I thought about widening the scope a little bit and making it more marketable. But I'm really glad I stuck to my guns because it feels so nice to create something just for us. It's really nice and so gratifying to see young Muslim girls reading it and enjoying it. It has obviously it's really heavily, my faith has heavily inspired the book. And I think part of that comes from the fact that as an adult, I've had the benefit of learning about really inspiring, powerful women from our tradition, but I didn't have that growing up. And I think a lot of women my age, that would resonate with them because there was no internet back then, and you'd maybe get a poorly translated book that might have exposed you to women from our tradition. But typically the women were only presented to us in reference to the men. The men were kind of front and center. And the women were only either wives or daughters. And it was never, you never really got a sense that they were women who you could aspire to be like or who you could be inspired by on their own merit, which as I grew up, I kind of thought that doesn't really make a tremendous amount of sense. The more sort of learning I did about my faith, I thought these women were actually really powerful in their own right. And I feel like I don't know if it's deliberately done, but I do feel like the contributions of women are always sort of downplayed or not referenced in our learnings. I had no idea, for example, that the majority of hadith originate from Aisha radiallahu anha. Like the majority of the hadith come from her, and that's a massive contribution. A source of law in Islam is mostly being derived from her. And I don't remember anyone telling me that growing up. But what I do remember hearing a lot of is that a woman's testimony is only considered half of that as a man's testimony. And I thought, there's such a dissonance there. Here we are on one hand being told that we're too emotional to to make a statement in court. And on the other hand, we have this source of law that comes only from the testimony of a woman. So there was a lot of kind of unpacking there and unlearning that I did as an adult. And part of the reason I wrote this book is because I didn't want my unlearning of that narrative to go to waste. I really wanted to extend that to the next generation and hopefully change how they view women, like Muslim women, both modern and classical. And I thought that was really important because I think there's an idea that speaking of Muslim women as from a strengths-based approach or lens is a really modern Western idea. And that classical women in classical Islam stayed in their homes and that their contributions were limited to domestic life. But the more I learned, the more I realized that actually there's heaps of evidence in classical texts that women contributed equally to public life. This isn't a modern Western feminist idea. So I really wanted my daughter and all our daughters to know about these heroines from our tradition. So that they can aspire to be like them, but they're not going to aspire to be like them if they don't even know they exist. I think that's all. I feel like I've talked a lot on that topic.
I love that. Actually, it's such an incredible reframe because what you're saying is that what you're bringing into your book is a fresher perspective to what's existed for such a long time. And I love that because that representation, particularly in children's literature, particularly in Islamic or faith-based books, it always felt when I was growing up, or particularly even as a parent reading to my children, that there's only one narrative of what a Muslim girl in a book looks like. And actually,
Yes.
your title, All the Ways to Be Pretty, I'd love to unpick that further with you. What did that mean? Where did that title come from? And what does that mean?
Oh my goodness. The title, the title was inspired by a number of things actually. I had there's another popular children's book that's sort of in the mainstream area of children's literature, and that's called All the Ways to Be Smart. And I love that book. I was reading that book to my daughter when she was younger, and it's got a very different perspective and focus. But I loved the title of it. And I remember thinking when I came up with the title of this book, what I liked about it is that I wanted to replace All the Ways to Be Smart with obviously All the Ways to Be Pretty, because this is a book for girls. And girls are often expected to be pretty. And I thought, I really want to reclaim that word because we are more than just pretty, and we are more than what's on the outside. We are pretty inspiring. We are pretty creative. We are pretty intelligent. We are pretty wise. So I don't want to do away with that word altogether, but I really dislike that word in and of itself. I'm not a fan of the word pretty by itself being used to describe me, my daughter. I almost feel like it's a trigger point. So let's reclaim that, shall we? Let's find another way to look at that word.
Yeah, no, I love that. And you touch upon something so important, a topic that I think a lot of parents, particularly Muslim parents, not just to girls, but in this conversation, girls around beauty standards, whether it's from a cultural perspective, whether it's from a generational perspective, you touch upon that topic in this. So growing up, what beauty standards were you exposed to within your family or your communities, and how has that personally shaped your view of what you're trying to get across through your work?
Ah, Vinish, I could write a thesis about this topic, but I'll do my best to keep it short for this platform. Um, in terms of beauty standards that I was exposed to, and I think this is something that might resonate with you as well because we come from similar backgrounds, but colorism was like the big one. Huge issues, still really prevalent today. And I mean, I was quite darker skinned when I was younger because I was outdoors in the Australian sun every day. So of course I was getting very brown, and that was sin number one, is getting darker. And it was never framed in a positive way in the sense of like when I look at how I talk about skin color now with my daughter, when we get darker in summertime, I'm like, aren't we lucky that we get to spend longer in the sun without burning? How nice is that? Whereas most people, if you've got lighter skin, you have to go in or reapply sunscreen regularly. I've never been sunburnt in my life growing up in Australia, which is an extraordinary thing. So I think of it as a positive now, but when I was growing up, it was like, no, 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 absolutely not.
And
So that was a big thing.
yeah, my daughter, she'd always color herself when she was a bit younger, and she'd try and find the right shade. And even when she'd tell people what she is, she's like, "Well, I'm golden." That's golden because I use the golden pencil to color myself in. So I'm not peach, I'm golden. And I was like, wow, yes. I mean, all that. Every time I was put,
That would have been nice. Wouldn't it have been lovely to have been called golden as a child? So there was that. That was a big one. And then there was also, I'm quite tall. Not for Australian standards, mind you. I'm 5'8", which is a very average height in Australia. But for Desi's, I was considered very tall. So there was like constant commentary about that. Again, framed in really negative language. I wasn't tall. I was huge. And what I'm realizing when I reflect on these sort of standards is how a lot of almost all beauty standards are anchored in long-term concerns in how not conforming to those standards will impede a person's marriageability. Like everything almost comes down to your marriageability. Who's going to marry you if you're too dark? Who's going to marry you if you're too big? Who's going to marry you if you're too tall? Where are we going to find a husband taller than you? And I feel like we hear that constantly when we are far beyond, like well before being even close to being marriageable age. Like I was hearing that in primary school. And I think, to her credit, my mother did the best she could to shield me from those views. But there's only so much she can do because it's pervasive. Like if it wasn't coming from family, it was coming from the broader community. If it wasn't coming from them, it was from Bollywood. It was from the movies we were watching, the music we were listening to and dancing to at weddings. So,
And I get that, right? It stems from everything. It stems from the clothes you wear, to how much makeup you wear. I've done so much work, and sometimes one of my gremlins that pops up, I might have told you this before, is like an Asian auntie judging what I'm wearing, how much makeup I've got, how tanned I am. So yeah, no, I think a lot of listeners who'd be listening to this or would be interested in the topic could really resonate from their own experience. But also, actually, what does that mean, for the future generations? What language are we using going forward? A pet peeve of mine is the word ugly. I hate it saying anything's ugly. If the shoes are ugly or the flowers are ugly, I just don't like the word ugly. Let's just not use it.
I hate that word too. And I haven't deliberately not used it, but I haven't actually used that word in such a long time. But obviously on some subconscious level, I must also have made a choice to not use it because it's an ugly word. And it's a terrible way to describe anything.
Absolutely. So, what are you hoping that, look, your book is for young Muslim girls, but actually there's so much, from what I'm just hearing and what we were just speaking around parenting. So what are you hoping both parents and children take away from your book?
Oh my gosh. So many things. There's so many angles to it. If you're talking about beauty standards, I think what I would really hope is that the book and the narrative serves as a tool for parents to rewrite beauty narratives for children and not pass them on unintentionally to their children. I think for a lot of us, the default is to parent the way we were parented, and you have to be really deliberate about not making the same mistakes potentially, and kind of doing things in a really different way and just being aware of the harm that you leave behind when you speak about beauty in such superficial terms. I'm not trying to say that beauty is not a thing. Physical beauty is a thing. It's a gift from Allah. It's a blessing. And there's nothing wrong with recognizing that and appreciating it. Like we all have different gifts. And for some of us, we're gifted with physical beauty. But I get really upset with the preoccupation with it. And I really hope that parents and children can understand that beauty is a superficial thing ultimately. Like it is literally skin deep and it doesn't last forever. I wish that people would spend the time that people spend focusing on their looks. I wish that they would spend that time focusing on their hearts. That's sort of the takeaway, I suppose.
Yeah, it's like stripping. Yeah, no, I really, really appreciate that perspective of yours. And, coming back to that faith-based understanding of, beauty standards, in your view, where do you think that maybe clashes where maybe mainstream media messaging our children are getting around beauty standards? And how, through your work and through your book, can, we start refocusing on what beauty standards and Islam can give to our children?
I mean, it's really tricky because the idea is that Islam in and of itself presents a better model. And I think that's wonderful that we have these aspirational ideas. But if we're not seeing it on the ground, and if Muslims are just as susceptible to those mainstream media messages that our children are consuming, then we're not necessarily doing those higher level ideas justice. And at the moment, I don't know that faith-based understandings of beauty are necessarily beating out over the mainstream messaging. I feel like those harmful messages are so pervasive, but they exist everywhere in every culture. And sometimes faith and culture is actually used to dress up those messages and create more harm. So, how many times do we hear about, covering your beauty, otherwise you will attract male attention, and girls who don't cover are like lollipops with ants. Have you ever seen those memes that people love to share of like a lollipop with the wrapper off and it's covered with ants? Have you seen that?
I've never seen that, but that sounds so interesting.
I remember seeing it a lot where that was a metaphor for girls who don't cover their beauty, that they'll be covered and swarmed by men, which that was something I heard growing up all the time. So I feel like that's a really problematic way where Islam has been used to actually kind of perpetuate those harmful standards. And there's also there's another famous hadith where the Prophet ﷺ, he states that a woman may be married for four things: her wealth, her lineage, her beauty, or her piety. And he says, choose the one who is pious and you will prosper. But I know so many men who use that hadith to try and argue that this legitimizes them only wanting to marry a woman because she is beautiful. So I think in theory, like religion or specifically Islam, it should encourage like a more holistic view of beauty. And obviously it's entirely consistent with the Sunnah to look beyond superficial things and focus on the heart. I think at this stage, it still feels aspirational to me. I think ultimately our communities, we need to stop treating marriage as the end goal for girls and women, because I do feel that a lot of the beauty standards stem from that focus. And it would be so wonderful if we would normalize celebrating women's lives and women's achievements in the same way that we celebrate their wedding days. Then we might get somewhere.
Your book is got so many gems around going beyond the physical beauty, right? And linking it back to that faith like you were just describing. And so in your view, what are some practical ways in which, parents, teachers, kids can start moving the conversation from how you look to who you are without making children feel that their physical selves are being dismissed as well?
I think what we touched on earlier, where we talked about acknowledging that physical beauty is a thing and a blessing that Allah has given some people. I think we can start by acknowledging that, because I mentioned earlier, we all receive different kinds of blessings. So some children or some people are blessed with wealth. Some people are blessed with health. Some people are born in conditions of safety and security. And yes, some of us are born with physical features that most people would describe typically as beautiful. And that is something to be thankful to Allah for and to appreciate. But I think it's really important that your children don't feel like being beautiful is like a perfect blessing or the only blessing that's worth having. So being beautiful, like any blessing, can be a double-edged sword. And the story of the Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam is a really great example of that. He was famously beautiful, and his beauty got him into a heap of trouble. And beautiful girls, they can get preyed upon. They're overly sexualized. They can attract a lot of unwanted attention. They can be made to feel like trophies as well, like their other attributes don't matter as much as their looks, and that can have really damaging impacts on their self-esteem. So I think reminding our children that being grateful for beauty is not a bad thing, but to also consider beauty alongside all the other things that Allah has given us. Allah gave you a mind. Allah gave you an intellect, a functional, healthy body. So just having that balance, I think, is really key.
Absolutely. And I know we spoke about this a bit, once we met the first time, but modesty can often be misunderstood as being quite restrictive. So again, in your view, how do you explain modesty to children in a way that feels empowering rather than limiting, and having the correct balance where around the physical elements, but the non-physical elements to modesty. And I guess not just for girls.
That is a really great question, Binish. And I've been thinking about it since we discussed it in our first chat as well. And I'm gonna be totally honest in our discussion. This is something that I still struggle with a little bit as an adult woman. So I'm not gonna pretend like I have all the answers. And I would love for you and anyone listening to share how they do it with their own children so we can hopefully get some guidance. For me, if I'm being truthful, modesty hasn't always felt empowering. I used to wear a hijab for about 11 years, and there were times when it did feel limiting. It felt like a barrier between me and career opportunities, for example. It felt like it limited my ability to like enjoy things like swimming. Nowadays, even brands like Nike are selling modest swimwear, but that was not a thing when I was young. There was nothing like that. There was no fashion brands selling modest clothing. Modest fashion was just not a thing growing up. So as an insecure young person, I did not feel particularly empowered when I was wearing like skivvy and jeans under my dresses. Um, Things are really different now in that space, although Islamophobia is once again on the rise. So hijabi girls are still facing really huge challenges when they go out. And I'm sure that there are times when, for them, being modest in the sense of wearing a hijab can feel really scary and disempowering. Uh, and they Allah reward our sisters that continue to wear the hijab in these times. So, like, I wish I had a great answer to this question, but I don't. I think if we're speaking of modesty and speaking of it in terms of the hijab, the head covering, the best people to ask that question to is our hijabi sisters.
Yeah, and that's why I always love speaking with you, Shmaila, because actually you're so honest in your views and it's real issues, right? Real experiences that we've lived through, our generation in particular can understand based on what was going on politically around the world as well. I think it's resurfacing now as well. So there's challenges I still carry. I can imagine, I know you still carry as an adult woman. But they're conversations that I love how your work is bringing to the table to say, actually, these are challenges. How do we navigate them as adults so that we can parent in a way to help our children navigate it? And one thing I really love about the work you're doing and your book and the topics you're picking out is really that reminder that actually, for our children, particularly our daughters, our Muslim girls, to feel empowered, there really needs to be that deep self assurance, which goes beyond the physical beauty, which goes beyond what they're wearing. And actually, once they have that inner strength, inner beauty of feeling fully self-assured that they can turn up and show up the way they want to, well, then actually then that provides them the additional layer to think about that physical side of modesty as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think if I'd had that grounding to begin with, where I felt strong in my identity as a Muslim, I would have felt much better equipped to deal with the challenges that came with wearing a hijab at such a young age.
Yeah. Okay, so then if we go a little bit more now into raising those confident children, those confident, when you spoke about the books that you read with your children, your daughter, All the Ways to Be Smart. And I know when we spoke before, you said a lot of this inspiration was actually conversations you have with your own daughter. And you wrote about what you know and what you were experiencing yourself. So do you mind sharing some of the key phrases or comments that you and your daughter, the conversations you have, and I guess some of the language that some of us parents can maybe take away instead of saying you look pretty or just the basic statements that we know of.
Oh my goodness. It is quite difficult. I do fall into the habit of telling my children. I feel like because I had such low self-esteem growing up, I have gone to the other end of the extreme where I tell my children they're beautiful all the time. And I'm not lying. They're genuinely the most beautiful things on earth to me. So I do that. I do tell them that they are beautiful. I tell them when they dress nicely. And I do notice that my daughter loves to be praised about that. I've noticed that her eyes light up if someone tells her your dress looks so nice and your eyes are so nice and your hair and your this and your that. But I've also noticed that she just likes to be praised more broadly. So I take advantage of that and I try really hard to make sure that I'm not overly focusing on her looks. And I think some of that is being really deliberate in how I speak to her about her achievements. That's one thing. So when we talk about her skills and what she's done well at school and what she does well with her little brother and managing, his her relationship with him and being a good friend, that's one side of it. The other thing that I'm really focusing on with her Islamic learning is the importance of acts of service in Islam, like how much those things are valued. So really kind of praising and pushing her in that direction, guiding her towards that so that she knows that she is just as capable of any other Muslim, male or female, of achieving Allah's pleasure, of gaining his pleasure. And it's got nothing to do with your looks. It's got nothing to do with your beauty. It's got nothing to do with your gender. So that's one thing I'm trying to do, is just kind of really focus on her as a person and what she brings to the table and the value that she brings. But another thing I really do, or I try to do, to move the conversation away from what's happening on the outside, is I'm really conscious of how I speak about my own body in front of her. So I only ever speak positively about my own body. So my face, my skin, my height, my hair. I only ever say nice things about it. And in a way, that's been so healing for me, because the more I say it, the more I believe it. So I might have like a big belly, but how could I possibly hate it? Because it's a reminder that Allah blessed me with fertility and I was able to grow and nourish my children in that belly. How can I hate my legs? Because Allah gave me legs that work and carry me where I need to go. My arms might be flabby, but they don't stop me from cuddling my children. Um, and if I ever sort of work out in front of my daughter or try and make like better eating choices to try and lose some weight, I only ever frame it in terms of health. So like getting strong rather than, looking skinny or fitting into particular clothes. And one thing we do in our home is that we never mock people for their appearance in our home, even people we hate. So even if we're talking about, really terrible people in the world that are doing all sorts of horrible things and waging wars and genocide, we never speak about their physical appearance. We never sort of say what a horrible looking person, or can't you see that this person looks ugly because he's ugly on the inside? Like we never do that. We never speak about physical attribute in that way. So that's something else that we're doing. I don't know if that's going to be enough, but I feel like it's a start.
It's so wonderfully put, because actually underneath all of that, it's like you've got the building blocks of self-esteem and building that confidence and knowing how to incorporate the sunnah around even treating people that treat you badly with kindness. And that's all of what you've just demonstrated and what you've just explained. And it comes to a bit of our kids, particularly with social media, are really, really struggling with that comparison culture. And I know our backgrounds, our society, loved comparison culture, particularly in our generation. So
Yeah.
what are your views around how to protect children, protect our daughters, even our sons, from that comparison culture, particularly at social media, peer groups, family comments? Our community plays such a big part in evolving their way of thinking and their way of seeing the world.
I think you have to find ways to strengthen their sense of who they are and their self-worth. Um, I think it's really easy to be harmed by comments that compare you to others if you already have a very low view of yourself, if you don't think you have anything to offer, any skills, any talents. So one thing I really am going to do with my son, he's quite small, but one thing I've done with my daughter is I try and get her involved in extracurriculars. Um, because I feel like being good at something is one way that you can bolster your self-esteem, and you can tell yourself, on days when you feel impacted by beauty standards, well, maybe I'm not pretty, or maybe I don't look like those models I see on TV or on my phone, but I can play piano really beautifully, or I can draw really well, or I'm excellent at tennis. So just finding ways to divert their attention into what they're good at and their strengths instead of focusing on their perceived deficits. And you said something before about using the right language in terms of how you speak to your children. And I was having a look at my notes, and I did find a few things that I think I try and use with my children. um, I think when it comes to building that self-esteem, we can use the word beautiful and we can use the word pretty, but maybe reclaiming it, as I mentioned earlier, to describe things other than physical attributes. So the way I use pretty in the book, for example, to say pretty inspiring or pretty creative. But even beautiful could be reframed to be like, well, what a beautiful thing you just did for that person. Or what a beautiful thing you just said. What a beautiful heart you have. So just kind of linking it to things beyond the superficial might be another way as well. I'm not a parenting expert. My kids are still young, and I have many, many years in which I might mess them up. So I don't know if any of these are going to work, but I think we're doing our best, and our parents did the best that they could, and we're doing the best that we can. And hopefully there'll be a generation at some point that are like, our parents did it perfectly.
Oh, I love it. There's so many things that you said that I was like, yeah, I want to try that. I'm going to give that a go. And it's an evolving conversation that's gonna carry on being something that we talk about. But it's so great that you're bringing this topic to the table, because I know so many parents, particularly mums, don't know how to navigate it. And I think a lot of us come from backgrounds or societies or families where, yes, everything's been given to us as best as it could. But maybe there's something around not being open with our words. And what you just described there is actually just be open with your words and use them creatively to support your children's self esteem on a daily basis. Create that. And maybe generationally we do it differently, but actually, coming back to your point around the ECAs, I know so many parents who are going left, right, and center with all their multiple kids, going to a number of different after school activities. But the way you framed it, it's so beautifully put, because actually, what you're really doing is you're honing in on their talents to give them that level of confidence, self esteem, communication, resilience, emotional intelligence, team working. Lovely. All beautiful or pretty, if we link it back to your work.
Thank you. I hope so. Because even I was talking to my husband about this as well, because even boys are not immune from beauty standards or standards of how they're supposed to look. And he also says that he had low self-esteem. But one of the things that really helped him was being good at sport. Like he was able to overcome a lot of how he felt about things, because he was able to use his being excellent at sport, being great at basketball, great at cricket, to kind of draw popularity at school, and that helped him to become more confident in his self-esteem. So that's where I got the idea about the extracurriculars for my children. It's a pain, let me tell you, to drive them from here to there, but it's just part of a gig, I think.
Oh, it's fantastic. I love it. I kind of want you to write a book for us, for boys, for Muslim boys, entitled "All the Ways to Be Strong." I think my 9-year-old would love that. So yeah, but
Let's see. I told you I'm a very organic writer, not disappointed at all. And everyone keeps telling me, if you wrote this book for your daughter, you need to write one for your son now. But it's just not coming to me. But it will, hopefully. But that's a great title for it.
I love it. I love it so much. Thank you so much, Shamaila. So, can you tell us now, what is next for you? What are you hoping to do more of in this space with your book? And what does the future of your work look like?
I don't know. At the moment, I'm in the space where the book is finally published. I signed my contract pre-COVID, and it took this long for the book to actually come to fruition just because of the delays that happened because of COVID, effectively. So I'm still in the moment where I'm like really enjoying this book, and I'm loving seeing it in people's homes and children enjoying it, which is wonderful. Um, so I'm sort of trying to just enjoy that momentum for the moment. I haven't thought about what's next. I do want to write a book for boys. I'd love to write a book for boys because I'm really interested in unpacking ideas around masculinity. I think that's a really interesting conversation to be had. We see so many toxic elements of masculinity. Um, I work in the family violence space, and I see a lot of men who use violence who were once little boys who were exposed to really harmful messaging around women. And I'm really interested in learning how people get to that point. And certainly Muslims are not immune. We see a lot of toxic patriarchy. We see a lot of misogyny in Islamic communities as well. So I'm interested in maybe tapping into that, unpacking it, writing something that can inspire boys to use their God-given strengths for good, to serve others, to be kind to others. Um, Again, as I mentioned, I'm not a disciplined writer, but if I get the time and I sit down and write down and research, then it might be that this book eventuates. But for now, there's nothing on the table.
I can't wait for us to connect and do something together in Dubai. So anybody listening, Shamaila and I are going to be doing something in Dubai. So watch this space. But in the meantime, then, where can people globally get access to your book? How can they get hold of your book and start reading it with their children?
I think the best place to access it is directly from the Cube website. There are local sellers. So I know in Australia there's Booktopia, there's Amazon, and there's also smaller booksellers as well. But I don't have a comprehensive list. And at the moment, a lot of books are still taking some time to actually be released, just because it's only recently been published. So I'm not 100% sure. The best place would probably be to try buying it from Cube directly. So that's www.cube.com. I think it's .com. And see where you end up. And if it doesn't ship to your location, then perhaps just getting in touch with Cube and finding out if there's a local stockist in your area. That would probably be your best bet.
Brilliant. Yeah, no, I know Q Publishing in the UK are very accessible. They've got really good delivery timelines. So yes, if you're listening in the UK, Cube are brilliant. And if you are in the UAE, Dean Square also stock Cube Publishing books. So please get a hold of Shamaila's work, and we'd love to hear what you think of this episode. Thank you, Shamaila, for joining. I love this conversation. I love the topic even more. It's so personal to me and the work I do, and being a parent, it just adds another layer. So thank you so much.
No worries. It has been my pleasure. This has been a lot of fun, and I look forward to catching up with you in person very soon.
Thank you so much for tuning into the Coaching Chapters podcast. I hope today's conversation left you feeling inspired and reminded you of what's possible when you follow your own calling, your own passion. If you love this episode, don't forget to subscribe, share it with a friend, and leave us a review. And remember, every big journey starts with a small idea, a small passion, and a small calling for